So carbon tax, as with any tax, is very much an emotive issue. I think when any company has to pay more tax, it's going to be challenged and kicked back on a little bit. But I think what's important to see is carbon tax is only one mechanism by government to try and encourage companies to relook at their energy profile, the energy transition, and how they contribute to climate change in the bigger scheme. Locally in South Africa, we have mandatory reporting. We are going to have mandatory reporting of greenhouse gas emissions already. There's going to be targets on those greenhouse gas emissions coming soon. There are incentives as well around environmental issues and carbon and greenhouse, and there's opportunity to offset. So it's very much one part of an overall mechanism to change corporates' behaviour. Also, at the moment, the effective rate of carbon tax has been quite low with all the offsets and incentives in there. We do expect that to change next year when the phase 2 of carbon tax come into play, and the effective carbon tax rate is likely to go up quite substantially, as Eskom is also going to be subject to carbon tax. We expect Eskom to be subject to carbon tax at that point as well. What we must also remember is, as well, putting the tax in place, the government is upping and changing the regulations around the low carbon economy, energy transition, allowing small scale production of energy yourselves or for corporates to do. And also globally, the technology is becoming more available, more cost effective. So I think there's a lot of carbon tax is a stick, but there's also a lot of carrots there, and also a lot of opportunity to change your energy mix to reduce your carbon tax bill. And then just one final point is the pressure for this is not just coming from governments; it is from investors. They're not looking at it from a carbon tax point of view, but they're very much looking at who they invest in and when they invest in and who they lend to, and basically saying to companies that are high carbon intense and not addressing some of these challenges that they will look to move their investment elsewhere. So there's a whole host of pressures playing out, and carbon tax shouldn't just be looked at in isolation in terms of where the world is going around climate change and the risk that that's creating. In South Africa, TCFD is still a voluntary reporting requirement or a voluntary requirement, but we are beginning to see more and more companies starting to look at TCFD, and some are putting out reports aligned to this TCFD framework, either as separate documents or as part of their integrated report. And it has been across a range of industries that the banks are doing, and we have seen some mining companies as well. And that's good to see, because I think sometimes TCFD is seen as a banking issue, but it's actually not. It's across industry. The banks are the end users almost of other companies' TCFD reports. So we're seeing some reports, but we're also seeing some companies actually look at what it means, because it is about your climate-related risk as to how climate's going to impact you as a business, your supply chain, your entire value chain, and looking at the scenarios of how that might play out and impact the longevity of your business, and whether that be climatic changes, physical weather events, breaks in supply chains, or the fact that your product and service that you sell may no longer be something that consumers are willing to purchase because of its high carbon footprint. So definitely companies are beginning to look at it. We're also seeing that climate change, some of these risks are playing out in the actual annual financial statements of companies, in terms of looking at valuations of certain assets, maybe provisions that are needed, perhaps even stranded assets where there's investments that you can no longer get an economic return from. So as a firm at PwC, we've built that into the financial audit methodology as well, to make sure we are looking at these these climate-related risks and the actual impact it has on the financial numbers. So it's not just about the TCFD framework, it is about how it comes into the annual financial statements. If I think globally, some countries have made the TCFD requirements mandatory. We haven't as yet in South Africa, and I think those countries that obviously have made it mandatory are much further ahead in their reporting and the views and the understanding of these risks. So some of our reports at the moment are quite high level, but it is a part of a process. And once you start the process at that high level, looking at your governance and looking at your risk, then it's easy to move forward to the next stage to actually understand what it what it all means for you as a business and your strategy and your risk management and ultimately then your reporting. So in terms of broader ESG reporting, there's an awful lot happening at the moment. It is getting quite confusing at times, but there's an awful lot of the standard setters and the framework setters. They've joined together. They're really looking at what's been built up over the last 20 years on ESG and climate reporting. And very much the consensus is that we need to move to a global set of standards to make it easier for the users of reports and the preparers of reports to report well on these fundamental issues that are impacting businesses' success and longevity. So that is happening at the moment. It's been going on about a year now, and there is urgency around it. We do expect by the time COP26 happens in November, or we're expecting perhaps some announcements at COP26 around where all these talks and exposure drafts and thoughts are going. So I think it's very much it's a work in progress. We do need to watch this space, but I think by the end of the year, we will have some element of certainty on where it's going. But it's definitely moving towards these global set of standards to make it easier for everyone to report on. Whether climate risk and climate reporting should outweigh ESG reporting or be the starting point, I think there's mixed views on that. I personally think not. I think ESG reporting in its broad sense, climate being part of it, is crucial. But I do know others are keen really to push the climate reporting as a starting point, quickly followed by broader aspects of ESG reporting.